partner with Axon, you immediately gain access to a full range of products and solutions designed to meet the complex needs of today's grower. We carry all major brands and sizes of tires and wheels. We specialize in large diameter wheels for large equipment. We have one of the largest OEM replacement wheel inventories in North America. Known for extreme flotation setups, duals, and triples, we have wheels for all makes and models of tractors, sprayers, combines, and grain carts. If we don't have the wheel in stock, we'll custom build, sandblast, and paint in-house. There isn't a more vast inventory in North America dedicated to helping dealers move more iron. With facilities on the West Coast and in the heart of the Midwest, leverage our 230,000 square feet of indoor inventory to solve any problem a grower may have. Move more iron with Axon.
Moving iron.
Hello and welcome to Moving Iron Podcast number 343. This edition of Moving Iron Podcast is brought to you by TractorZoom. TractorZoom has access to over $20 billion in heavy equipment sales data. TractorZoom's Iron Comps is the industry's trusted solution for transparent equipment values and auctionable pricing insights. Wow, you think I'd have that memorized by now. I am Casey Seymour here, and we are going to discuss what's going on in the sprayer market here with Andy Campbell. He's got another issue here of what's happened in the marketplace. And I think sprayers are a really interesting one to pay attention to. I think if there's any one machine segment out there that during the supply chain issues we saw in 21 and 22 that really got affected, I think sprayers was one of them. Sprayers seemed like they had an issue just with a lot of different things when it came to solution pumps, when it came to boom components, when it came to just tank things. I mean, whatever it was, there seemed like there's always something popping in and out on the sprayer side of the business. So I think you're going to see some of that reflected here a little bit as we move forward. The one thing I will say, as we move forward through how application equipment is looked at, and we'll talk a little more about this when we get over to the planter side. But I think as you start looking at some of these sprayer upgrades that we're starting to see, more and more manufacturers are coming together with an upgrade kit part of the machine that's coming through there. And I really am thinking that you're going to see a lot more machines like sprayers that don't continually to see a trade cycle, but an upgrade of technology. And I think we're going to see some of that here. And I think as these numbers that we're starting to see right now, we're going to start tracking some of these numbers, and I think we're going to see less and less numbers on the market as we move forward. Now, we could see a bit of a ballooning here in 23 and 24, but I would say that long-term, less machines are going to come to the marketplace. So that's my 2 cents there on that. I'll see what Andy's got to say on with this presentation here. So let's take a look at it.
Casey and Aaron, welcome to TractorZoom's World Headquarters, and I've got some February sprayer data that I'd like to break down with you. Let me zoom out here and look at all the sprayer data. It looks like we've softened a little bit coming off of December highs, obviously, but even when we compare it with the year over year, this February we have 50 for auction, 206 average for dealership. Let's move that back to last February. Dealership pretty much looks to be about the same. Obviously, we peaked a little bit later in this year when the supply chain problems were at their peak, but auction sitting at 68. Now, seems a little weaker at 50 here in February, but the devil's always in the details. And so let's dive into that. So for 0 to 1,000 hours, last February.
So I want to point out one thing as I was looking at this graph, something that struck out to me a little bit here is if you look at where these points are now and what they looked like let's see if I can get back just a little bit and get away from some of the things here. So if you're taking a look at the widening of where we're at here. So if you look at this distance to this distance here, and you look at this distance to this distance here, they're about the same, I guess is the point I'm trying to make. As you look at these as it narrows here, where we saw again a constraint of a little bit of things happen, but it starts to narrow, then it starts to get wide. And where we're at now, coming out of that midsummer time frame where we saw a lot of machines that were ready to be used that weren't available yet, there was a fairly decent run in the market here, and we saw that take place. And as these things move along, what we're seeing to look at now here, I would say auction value is the one thing that I'm paying close attention to and where we're at. But again, this is the seasonality of the time that we're in right now. This is a good selling time for sprayers, but a lot of places where they would be top dressing right now, they're in the crop's not in the best shape. So there could be some of that playing into that as well.
A little bit coming off of December highs, obviously. But even when we compare it with the year over year, this February we have 50 for auction, 206 average for dealership. Let's move that back to last February. Dealership pretty much looks to be about the same. Obviously, we peaked a little bit later in this year when the supply chain problems were at their peak, but auction sitting at 68. Now seems a little weaker at 50 here in February, but the devil's always in the details. And so let's dive into that. So for 0 to 1,000 hours, last February, auction sitting over 200, dealership at 341. Dealership seems to increase here a little bit, probably a price drag pulling up. The auction market, though, again, high variability, probably not seeing a lot of these this February at auction. And so with that variability, just comes, you get the highs and lows, pulling that average all over the place. And as you get older into these machines, the value drops considerably. So you've got 1,000 to 2,000 hours. Last February, auction just under 100, dealership at 213. Again, you see that variability with the auction side and a little bit of strengthening in the dealership side. So we're going to break for a second, and I want to show you within the IronComps tool because I think there's a few bit more nuanced pieces of information that can tell us what's going on in this market. Okay, so here we are within the IronComps tool, looking at the chemical applications category and self-propelled sprayers. With sprayers, there's some seasonality with this, but we have an index specifically for self-propelled sprayers, and it's not seasonally adjusted here on the sprayers. But then if you look year over year, December, 1.25 for last year, this December, 1.38. That's roughly about a 10% increase year over year, which, I'd be interested on your take if that's what you saw. But that is what I'm seeing in a lot of different regions. It's about a 10% increase across all sprayers year over year. And now down here to the bottom, these three graphs here.
So I would agree with what he said. I think we're seeing more sprayers show up. We're seeing more deliveries show up. We saw a lot of deliveries for sprayers happen here late, just like we saw on the combine side of it. We saw a lot of late season sprayers show up, and a lot of machines are sitting in sheds that have been in there for a while that have not had any hours put on them. So I think that's a fair statement what he's talking about there, that there are more machines being delivered, therefore there are more machines on the overall areas to buy them.
Propelled sprayers. With sprayers, there's some seasonality with this, but we have an index specifically for self-propelled sprayers, and it's not seasonally adjusted here on the sprayers. But then if you look year over year, December, 1.25 for last year, this December, 1.38. That's roughly about a 10% increase year over year, which, I'd be interested on your take if that's what you saw. But that is what I'm seeing in a lot of different regions. It's about a 10% increase across all sprayers year over year. And now down here to the bottom, these three graphs here are the ones that I really like to dive into. And again, last year, we're looking here at this top one, dealer price changes by hours, by different hour categories for sprayers. There's just so little supply out there last year. So any kind of price change really moved the market. And this dark blue was last year. It's scattered kind of all over the place. Now what we're seeing here with this light blue in this year is more really responsive of more full market. So we've got a little bit of a price increase year over year for sprayers less than 500 hours. But what I want you to notice here, and this is going to correlate with the graph below it, that we've got, 2 to 3 to maybe 4% price decreases from anything from 500 to 1,000, all the way up to maybe 3,000 hours on these sprayers. This is over the past 3 months of price changes we've seen. But look where the supply sits. So we have self-propelled sprayers listed by hour range. This is a percent of a whole of what's sitting on dealership lots. And so this area up here where you saw the greatest price decreases this last month also happens to be this whole area right here in light blue. It's current. That's got the greatest amount of supply on the market. And again, to draw a distinction between last year and this year, last year being this darker blue, this is not a normal curve with the supply. There was a bit of a relative glut sitting here at 2,000 hours. Shortage right below that. It's just low volume, created a lot of variability and didn't move things through smoothly, maybe like we're used to. And I think we're getting a little closer to maybe a new normal. And so is this kind of washout curve that you think that we're going to have to get used to for dealerships? Or is there a lot more change coming within the supply and maybe even the demand side that's going to change the washout curve over the next couple of years?
So I think this what he's talking about here kind of prefaces to my earlier statement when we first opened up the podcast, was that we're going to see more machines like this that go through the cycle, but that less machines ultimately show back up to be sold. And I think as you're looking at this, you sort of see this here. It's not like it's a big change from last year, but I'm anticipating seeing a smaller amount of machines year over year fall into this, just because of what we're seeing as far as how washout cycles go with machines that have. I mean, you start looking at some of these machines, you start to pay, $500,000 to $700,000, $800,000 for a sprayer, depending on how it's set up and what you're doing with it. And you can get the latest technology for, a quarter to half of that price, depending on what you're doing to it. It makes a lot of sense to keep what you have and update the technology. And I think we're going to start seeing more and more of that happen. As you're looking at some of the stuff as the price comes down, like he's talked about, I think again that kind of comes back to this whole scarcity premium that we've talked about. More machines are available now than there were this time last year, and we're seeing the reflection of that in the pricing. So supply and demand is working like it's supposed to.
Interested on your guys' take on that one. And then finally, I always like going and looking at like to like as much as I can, do some apples to apples comparison. So self-propelled sprayers here in the past month, light blue being the current year, and then dark blue being the same time frame last year. What we're seeing at this low hour range is about a 13.5% drop. This range right here, 12.5% drop. This range, this difference year over year right here, it's about a 10% drop. So again, a higher price drag at the lower end to accommodate for the new planners that have a larger OEM price increase. But if you look from a percentage change here in this 2,000 hour category, year over year, this is a 22% price increase. Seems a little bit out of normal until you look up here and see what was actually going on last year. This happened to be where a lot of those sprayers were sitting last year in this 2,000 to 2,500 hour category.
So again, I think that 2,000 hour sprayer, 1,500 hour to 2,000 hour sprayer for the longest time has been a very popular sprayer for hour wise for people to buy. Last year, there was an abnormal amount of machines on the marketplace to be out there to be sold. Now, all that being said, there might have been a bunch of machines out there to be sold. How many of them were actually available to be taken to the farm? That's a whole nother story that we have to take a look at. I think as you look back down here at what he's talking about down here, I think it kind of goes back to what I'm saying now is if you look at the machines that are coming in and how they're coming in and what's happening with them, you're seeing more machines not being traded and more machines being run longer than what we've seen in the past. I'm going to go back to this above this 500 hour machine over here that he's talking about. Again, I think it's kind of like the combine situation we saw. There's a lot of sprayers out there that don't have a lot of hours on them that are going to be retraded in and moved back through that have less than a half a season of use on them. So there's going to be a lot of really low hour sprayers out there that are going to be available, and it'd be interesting to watch to see how those play out. But I think they're going to be. I think these machines have a great opportunity of selling, just because of where we're at on pricing with new and how that compares. So I think this is we're gonna see a bigger function of these machines come through on that under 100 hour side than we've seen in the past.
And in step, those prices were depressed probably the most. That's come back a little bit more in line, and so therefore the price has risen to maybe what would be normal or more normal in line with other categories. So therefore, in that category, we're really seeing a big year-over-year price increase. So general economics, but it's interesting to see this actually take place in the real world. So hope you guys are doing well. If you have any questions on iron comps or Tractor Zoom data, feel free to reach out to us if you want to list. It's tractorzoom.com, and we'd be happy to help any dealerships get their equipment out there. Thanks, and take care, guys.
All right, thanks, Andy. That was good stuff there. So kind of to recap a little bit, like you said, I mean, I think kind of what I talked about at the beginning kind of laid itself out there pretty nice as what that looked like. Again, low-hourred machines on the marketplace where we see stuff at low-hourred. The volume of machines are starting to move. We're starting to see a lot more movement in the marketplace because I think some guys are kind of settling in, and then supply and demand's catching up there. So I think what Andy threw out there, I'm seeing a very similar pattern where when I look at the overall sales data that I come up with. So I think it's a good place to stop for this one. I am Casey Seymour with Moving Iron Podcast. Check me out on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Moving Iron LLC. You can go to LinkedIn at Moving Iron Podcast and go to the Moving Iron Podcast YouTube channel, which is the Moving Iron Podcast, YouTube channel. Check it out there. Go to MovingIronLLC.com for everything Moving Iron related, and check out the upper right-hand corner. Check out the Moving Iron Podcast Summit page, September 11th through the 13th in downtown Nashville. We have another Moving Iron Summit coming up there. If you're interested in signing up for that, all the information's there. But if you need more information, send me an email at MovingIronPodcast, MovingIronPodcast.com, and I will make sure to get back to you on that. So I want to thank the guys over at Tractor Zoom for putting us together, especially Andy for taking time to put all this data together and send it over to me. So with that, I'm Casey Seymour with Andy Campbell. Let's get some iron, folks. Out.
Moving iron in the 21st century.